Welcome, I'm Eleanor Burns. Today we're on location in Grape Day Park in Escondido, California. This park is run by the Escondido Historical Society. Well, we're very fortunate to have a group of individuals with foresight that gathered all of these historical buildings and artifacts together into one site so that we can enjoy it for generations to come. Well, that is one common thread that binds Americans together. The love of our history, love of our country, love of the brave. Well, I've put together a collection of quilts that are going to take us along our trail to freedom. Some of the quilts are over 100 years old, some of the quilts are new, but all of the quilts have a story to tell. Now, this first quilt is called Delectable Mountains in honor of the Pilgrims who settled here in 1620. Ooh, the mountains are beautiful in reds and blues, and the sky around the mountains are stars, and then a flag border surrounds the whole quilt. Well, the Pilgrims came here to escape their religious persecution in England, and oh, what a time they had. They came here looking for the land of good and plenty, or the Delectable Mountains. John Bunyan, in his book Pilgrim's Progress, said these words, "Behold, the gardens and orchards, the fountains of water." Well, it certainly sounds like America to me. And then 350 years later, John Kennedy said, "We're a land of immigrants." Well, the second quilt along our trail to freedom is Turkey Tracts, in honor of the Pilgrims' first Thanksgiving in America. And this one is wonderful, very old, in the colors of autumn. Orange for the turkey tracts, some yellow, and then beautiful quilting, hand quilting in between each one of the solid blocks. Well, that first winter, the Pilgrims had quite a time. Out of the original 104, only 44 survived, but they proved that they could survive in this land of freedom. Well, our third quilt is along our road to Boston, and this one is called the Boston Trail. Now, I know you may think of this as Drunkard's Path. That's probably the most common known name, but it is also called Boston Trail. It's wonderful with its turkey red, muslin blocks, and an interesting design winding across this pattern. Certainly a trail to Boston. And now we're into the Boston Common. This is a new quilt made just recently. Beautiful and patriotic reds and blues, starting in the very center with the reds, going out into the blues. And then there's this large common area in the large scale print surrounding the common. And then these are all trails, perhaps the Boston Public Garden, leading off to the sides. Now, this is all new fabric from Sturbridge Village, Reproduction Fabrics. It's wonderful. Well, remember, it was William Blackstone that founded Boston in 1634, and he set up a common area in the middle of town for all of the cows to pasture together. Each day, the colonists would bring their cows, they'd sit together. It was kind of like a cow daycare. And then in the evening, the cows would all walk off into their homes. I think that's where the highway system for Boston was probably founded, if you've ever been to Boston. Well, it was William Blackstone that had those cows there. You know, it was 200 years the cows pastured in that common area. And moving on from Boston Common to the last quilt, this one, I think, started the Boston Tea Party. It's called the Economy Patch, and it's a square on a square on a square. And the quilt maker took her fabrics, lined up all those colors in beautiful diagonal rows down through the quilt. Well, you know the story. They brought that tea into the harbor, placed a tax on it. The colonists had no say. Taxation without representation. So one evening, they boarded those ships and dumped all of that tea into the harbor. Well, in 1775, the ladies said with their teacup, "No more shall my teapot so generous be, and filling the cups with this pernicious tea, for I'll fill it with water and drink out the same, before I lose liberty, that dearest name." And the rest is history. We're here at Grape Day Park in Escondido, California, at the Santa Fe Depot, built originally in 1888 and moved to this site in 1984. Well, this is just a perfect spot to share quilts possibly named after some well-known patriots. You know, the Kansas City Star actually named this one Patriotic Star. Ooh, I just love the turkey red lattice between the 30 blocks. Now, 23 of the blocks are the same, and then there's some extras on the edges. Now, the block itself is made of 32 red and white diamonds set together with navy, so the block actually looks round. Well, perhaps it was made for the centennial or some big patriotic celebration. Well, I selected this quilt for Benjamin Franklin. It's called Waste Not, Want Not. It's a string quilt. It's made from leftovers. Now, if I were making this 100 years ago, I would take and make a striped square and just cut them on one diagonal, put them back together again. Don't know how she did it though. Now there's cadet blues throughout, and then indigos. The lattice is a striped mourning print with double pink cornerstones. Now I want you to look at the back because it has the Baptist fan quilting on it. It's very heavy, and this is like a flannel. Now this pattern was for old Ben Franklin. Just suits him well. He said, "Where liberty is, there is my country." And we can thank him for this quote. "In this world, nothing is certain but death and taxes." His Poor Richard's Almanac was just full of quotes. "Keep thy shop, and thy shop will keep thee." And I like this one. "God heals, the doctor takes the fee." Pretty good. Well, the next one. Horace Mann was definitely the influence behind this quilt. This is the Schoolhouse Quilt. Now, the Schoolhouse is interesting because it has 6 pane windows throughout. And I especially like the burgundy and navy schoolhouses. There's a couple of them. And then they're set together with these narrow strips in between the roof line and the front. Well, in the 1830s, the young lawyer argued that every state should provide the best possible cost-free schooling for all its children. Well, Mann said, "If we do not prepare children to become better citizens, our republic must go down to destruction." Well, fortunately, the compulsory education law was passed in 1837, and by 1840, many states had laws establishing public schools. Good thing. Now, this old-time spool pattern is to honor Betsy Ross. Now, she was the 8th of 17 children. Now, just like the spool block, she performed all manner of sewing jobs when she was apprenticed to a local upholsterer, including flag making. Oh, I can just imagine. She would stack up all those wooden spools. Well, it was there that she met her first husband, John Ross, who was also an apprentice. Now, on Sundays, you would find the two of them at Christ Church at Pew 12. And some Sundays, you would find George Washington, America's new commander-in-chief, sitting in an adjacent pew. Now, according to legend, when a secret committee, including George, asked Elizabeth to design a flag, she proposed a 5-point star because she said they could be cut out much more quickly than the 6-pointed ones. Great story. Now, speaking of George, this is the cherry tree quilt. It's also known as the Tree of Temptation. Well, it's interesting that it's been machine quilted throughout, and look at the cherries. They're evenly spaced throughout the quilt. Well, on cutting down this famous tree, George supposedly said, "Father, I cannot tell a lie. I did it with my little hatchet." Well, probably. The story was fabricated by his biographer Parson Weems, but for certain, George did say, "Liberty, when it begins to take root, is a plant of rapid growth." Well, I'm having fun with this one. It's just called Darting Minnows. Well, it's just wonderful with indigo blue points and muslin, and then the stripes are salmon colored. They're just beautiful. Well, I'm associating this quilt with Samuel Adams for stirring up fish. Oh, he was just a fiery rabble-rouser. He was far better at brewing dissent than beer. You know, he actually just about ruined his father's brewery business. But Samuel Adams was the main man behind the Boston Tea Party. Well, now we have a lady coming up. This is the Dolly Madison star. It's just beautiful brown sawtooth star. There's dark browns throughout. There's pink and there's copper tone matters. Lots of stripes. Some of the stripes have even disappeared in the quilt. Now, Dolly was the lovely wife of the 4th President of the United States, James Madison. And because of her bravery, the country women were inspired to name this quilt block after her. Well, during the British invasion of Washington in 1814, she escaped from the presidential house with just precious state documents and silver. You know, she rushed back to the White House to cut the famous Gilbert Stuart portrait of George Washington from its frame. And she escaped just before the British burned the Capitol. Just such a brave woman in history. Now, these blocks are called the Seth Thomas Rose. Look at this. Now, Seth Thomas was a colonial craftsman, and he turned out superb clocks. Now, when you look at this, the petals are just like the numbers on a clock. Now, note that there's no half past. Now, I wonder what that means. Well, playwright Robert Sherwood said, "Nothing undertaken by free men and free women is impossible." Remember that you too can create a quilt that just shouts freedom. We're in a bedroom of a beautiful Victorian country house built in 1890. Well, it was moved here to Grape Day Park around 1980. It's so much fun to imagine waking up in this room with its charming wallpaper. Well, the day begins with the necessary chamber pot. This is what one looks like, just in case you've never seen one. And the pitcher is filled with water and waiting for my bath. Look at this. Just pour that water in there and you're set to go. So much fun. Well, the Historical Society itself has a collection of 50 quilts, but today I brought several of my own in the continuing story of our trail to freedom. This is the postage stamp quilt. Now, it's made of 1-inch finished size squares. It starts right here in the center, has brown in the very middle with 4 dark red around the outside. And then here, there are also rows of the brown and red that frame the hundreds of scraps. Well, this quilt represents the Stamp Act of 1765. Britain required that newspapers and all legal documents be printed on paper with special stamps attached. The colonists would have to buy these stamps. So once again, no taxation without representation, while mobs broke into the warehouses, burned the stamps stored there. Parliament ended the Stamp Act because it could not be enforced. Now, this is a bit of history. Look at this. This is a dressmaker's model outfitted in the latest Paris fashion so that the customers could just look at the model and pick the dress of their choice. Well, this is the dress of my choice, this 1900 lace dress. But you know, I don't think I can fit into that one. Well, remember the name Blackstone. Now, he was the original settler in Boston. Well, I found the name Blackstone again in this cigar ribbon throw. It was probably made around 1880. Well, the custom of wrapping bundles of cigars with ribbons was started in Cuba. Now, in this one, there's various shades of gold outlined in the feather stitch. Just beautiful. And then sometimes herringbone stitches were used. Well, typical of most cigar ribbon quilts, this one is not quilted. The ribbons were stitched onto a muslin base. And on this one, the outside edges were finished with this beautiful, fragile lace. It's just wonderful. Well, by 1896, modern-day magazines started printing instructions on just how to use these cigar ribbons in pillows and in quilts, thus getting the women involved in the smoking craze. That was pretty clever, wasn't it? Well, in the late 19th century, American cigarette production lagged behind the more popular cigar. So manufacturers decided to place a prize in every package in the form of a silk fabric ribbon. Well, in this beautiful crazy quilt, there is a commemorative silk or silky that was made in patriotic observance of the Battle of Bunker Hill. Now, this particular one shows a picture of Major General Joseph Warren, who was slain in that battle. It says right on it, right on the silky, Bunker Hill Monument, commemorative June 17, 1775. And then it says consecrated June 17, 1843. Well, if you look at this crazy quilt, it's just absolutely beautiful. Stitching throughout the quilt, the silk patches are in excellent condition. And over here, a second silky shows the Honorable Daniel Webster. It says statesman and orator. Now, Daniel Webster said, "I was born an American, I live an American, I shall die an American." Well, like the cigar ribbon quilt, this one does not have batting in it, but look at this. It has this wonderful wool backing on it, just in excellent condition, especially for the age. Well, this quilt represents a famous battle in the fight for freedom during the American Revolution. This quilt is called Burgoyne Surrounded. It has such a good story. Well, these red squares represent Gentleman Johnny Burgoyne. Now, he was a poetry-writing, party-loving British general. And in June of 1777, he marched his 7,000 soldiers from Canada down to New York. Well, his whole purpose was trying to seal New England off from the southern states. And then Burgoyne was to be met by another redcoat. Over here, General Howe was supposed to be marching to meet him. These represent General Howe. Well, the colonists, or the Minutemen, or we can call them the Blue Men if we want, the Blue Coats, they met him right here, and they surrounded the British in Saratoga, New York, represented by this large red square right in the middle. So the Blue Coats surrounded Burgoyne. Well, for 4 days they battled until Burgoyne surrendered. We know the battle at Saratoga, New York was the turning point in the American Revolution because it convinced France to become an American ally. Well, Thomas Jefferson said, "The tree of liberty must from time to time be refreshed with the blood of tyrants and patriots." It's such a pleasure to sit at this old sewing machine. Now, this quilt maker had to treadle. I see that down there. I know she didn't have a rotary cutter and a ruler, but she had this really cool tool. She had a sewing bird. Now, right here is the pin cushion. There's a clamp on it so that you could just clamp it to the bottom of your table, your sewing machine. You just pinch the tail together, and you can put a piece of fabric right in the beak of the bird just to free your hands. You could do unsewing or some hand sewing with the help of the bird. It's just great. Well, earlier I showed you the beautiful Delectable Mountain with the wonderful red mountains and the stars in the sky. Blue mountains and just working from the center out. Well, I wanted to show you the easy technique because I know you'll want to make your own freedom quilt. Now it starts out with rectangles, and these are mirror image blocks. So you have to take 2 sets of rectangles, 2 pairs. Right here the rectangle is 8.5 inches by 9 inches. There's 2 layers of the sky, 2 of the mountain. You have a ruler that you just put on the edge and cut right down through the middle. I already cut, but watch how magical it is. Ta-da! You have 2. And down here in the corner, there's just this little tip that you cut off. Okay, that's for the sky. Repeat the same for the mountains. Cut it in half. And right here in that little tip, cut that little tip out, take it, and get rid of it. Now, take these pieces and you open up for the mountains. We'll go like this. You have 2 of them. Mirror image, so you take half at a time. And then this is the second half right here. Put them right sides together, and whenever you flip them right sides together for sewing, you actually use that little notch for matching. Watch how fast. I can just take these pieces and sew them together. Okay, and that's what it looks like there. Press the seams towards the mountain. Now comes probably the most magical part. You take a ruler and you just cut these into 2-inch sections. Watch how fast this is going to happen. And here they are, all cut. Out of each half of the mountain, you cut 4 different 2.5-inch pieces. Get them all lined up. Now all you have to do is take the middle 2 sections and switch them. Ta-da! And take the next 2 and just keep on switching. Now if you think that this looks magical, the next step is even more magical, because when you start to sew these pairs together, then you don't even need to match anything up. It's just wonderful. Well, this one is the Delectable Mountains. I also have the Boston Common. What a perfect quilt that is. If you can take 9 strips of 2.5-inch pieces and sew them together in order over and over again, you can make the Boston Common. Now it starts right in the middle, and actually the very center part is 2 sets of 9-inch strips. This is the piece right here, fits right across the middle, and you just sew those together for the center part, and then for the seminal around the outside edge, all you need to do is take those same strips and offset them when you sew them together. Offset them 1 each time, and you can make the beautiful Boston Common. You know, Albert Einstein said, everything that is really great and inspiring is created by the individual who can labor in freedom. Well, I know you'll have a great time sewing your freedom quilts together.